Being original is so unoriginal. Everything is derivative, and it may be true that there is nothing new under the sun. New ideas are just amalgamations of old ideas. New trends are just modern expressions of natural human tendencies. All of this has happened before, and all of this will happen again. Creativity is making unique connections between disparate concepts and natural phenomena. Sometimes the desire to be unique can push us into a paradoxical state. If everyone around us is desperately trying to be as unique as possible, then to follow suit would be the least original thing we can do. The truth is, we don't need to try to be unique. We are all unique individuals by our very nature. What is more important, being unique or being successful? Why not strive to be both? Being unique doesn't require direct effort. It just requires the acquisition of unique experiences. If you focus on improving yourself and achieving success, you will be unique. There's a scene from a movie that really stuck with me since I first watched it that illustrates this point quite nicely. The movie is SLC Punk, which was released in 1998. It's an exploration of punk culture in Middle America in the mid-80s and definitely worth the watch if you haven't seen it. Also, if you haven't seen it, then I'll give a spoiler alert here. Near the end of the movie, there's a scene where the protagonist, Steve-O, is talking to a girl named Brandy, and she calls into question punk culture and anarchy. Brandy asks, "Why do you go out of your way to look like a bum? Aren't you rebelling against society? Wouldn't it be more of an act of rebellion if you didn't spend so much time buying blue hair dye and going out to get punky clothes? It seems so petty. You want to be an individual, right? You look like you're wearing a uniform. You look like a punk. That's not rebellion. That's fashion." Then Steve-O asks, "Then what's rebellion?" And Brandy responds, "Rebellion happens in the mind. You can't create it. You just are that way." By fighting against social norms and traditions, we can end up pigeonholing ourselves into a state of conformity. By desperately trying to be as unique as possible, we can destroy our own individuality. When faced with the challenge of learning how to successfully integrate into society, it can be tempting to embrace anarchy and discard the old rules and make up our own. The problem with that instinct is that anarchy is impossible. Many of the rules in the social contract were not decided upon arbitrarily. They are inevitable byproducts of nature. For example, masculinity and femininity are not socially constructed and imposed upon us, but rather emergent properties of our physical, chemical, and biological nature. There may be some minor variability in the ways in which we choose to engage in and interact with masculinity and femininity, but you can't wholesale erase or replace them. You could choose not to engage in either masculinity or femininity, but to do so would be to greatly diminish yourself. If you're removing those aspects of yourself, what are you replacing them with? If you're not replacing them with something else, then you're just subtracting from yourself and adding nothing. Another example would be the rebellion against religion. Humans seem to have a profound need for many of the benefits provided by religion. The community, meaning, purpose, structure, and moral framework seem to be vital for our well-being. If you subtract religion without adding something that provides all of those benefits, then our lives will be diminished. If you do that, then people will feel a desperate need for those benefits, and they might start creating their own versions of religion. If you take God away from people, they start worshiping themselves. If you take sacred meaning away from people, they will find things to hold up as sacred. If you take structure away from people, they will create new structures. This is why anarchy is impossible. The social contract cannot be eliminated permanently. If you throw away all the rules and bring down the hierarchy, a new hierarchy will immediately begin to form. Establishing hierarchical order is a fundamental aspect of human nature. The only way we can survive and thrive is to work together. The only way we can work together is if we establish a hierarchy and rules. If we are spending most of our time and energy creating our own rules and finding our own meaning and purpose, then we will have much less time and energy to spend on anything else. By utilizing traditional structures and rules, we can expend most of our effort on our own unique ambitions. Scientists don't have to start from scratch and develop their own scientific methods and body of scientific knowledge. They learn the scientific knowledge that has been previously gathered, and they learn to use the existing scientific methods so they can work on the overall advancement of science. In the same way, we should not ignore the social and political knowledge that has been acquired over millennia. Each individual cannot start from scratch and develop a unique, feature-complete, holistic system for living life. We stand on the shoulders of countless giants who spent an innumerable amount of time developing the social contract that allowed for the building of our modern world. It would be foolhardy to decide to jump off their shoulders so we can start over from the ground up. If there are aspects of the social contract with which you disagree, then you may be able to alter it, but only if you learn to work within the existing social contract. Also, if you cannot demonstrate a meaningful understanding of the existing social contract by becoming successful within it, then perhaps you are not qualified to critique it or offer alternatives. The desire to break social conventions can be a defense mechanism triggered by the difficulty of learning to operate successfully within them. If you are not confident that you can learn to play by the rules, it may seem like an easier option to embrace nihilism and essentially give up and start making your own rules as you go. Learning how to play chess very well may be a difficult challenge, but it is necessary if you want to play competitively. You can refuse to follow the traditional rules and just make up your own, but if you do that, nobody is going to want to play with you. If you insist upon making up your own rules for the game of life, then nobody is going to want to play the ultimate game with you. This seems to be a commonly used defense mechanism. If some achievement seems too difficult to attain, some people simply denigrate that achievement and convince themselves that it is not worth attaining. That way they don't have to deal with any of their own inadequacies and work to improve themselves. If you lower expectations, you diminish competition and growth and improvement. Community is obviously a good and necessary thing, both for individuals and for society as a whole, and community requires conformity. For a community to be strong and healthy, there needs to be an overarching, unifying culture that binds people together. A strong community is one where all the members are playing the same game, following the same rules. Even the most anarchistic progressives who seem to despise social rules are following very strict rules themselves. If one of them expresses an opinion that does not fall in line with their established doctrine, they may face cancellation and ostracization. Assimilation is necessary for social cohesion. There should be room for individuality, but we need to find a healthy balance between fitting in and standing out. We should not care too much for how other people think or feel about us, but we shouldn't completely dismiss the perception of others. From a practical standpoint, it is necessary to cultivate a persona that others find appealing. If nobody likes you, then you're going to have a great deal of difficulty playing the game of life. If you care too much about the opinions of others and are always trying to please everyone, then people will walk all over you, and a lot of people will find you unappealing. We have to find the right balance point between the two. We should also be aware of our innate desire to conform and try not to fall victim to herd mentality. Peer pressure can cause people to think, say, and do things they normally would not. It can be difficult for some people to conform, but it could be even more difficult for some people not to conform. Sometimes there are psychological effects at play that are mostly or entirely subconscious, and it can be difficult and perhaps even impossible to detect these effects. There were a series of experiments that were published in the 1950s that were conducted by a social psychologist named Solomon Asch. In these experiments, there would be a number of participants who were actually working for the experimenter, and a single participant who was the real test subject. They were told they were going to engage in a vision test. The participants were shown lines and asked to compare the length of lines in relation to each other and to other objects. The real test subject would answer last or second last. At first, all the subjects would give correct answers, but as the experiment progressed, the subjects who were in on the experiment would begin to give incorrect answers. The point of the experiment was to see if the real test subjects would give in to peer pressure and conform to the obviously incorrect answers. Only 24% of subjects did not conform. 75% conformed at least once, and 5% conformed every time. There was an average 37% conformity rate across all the trials. There was also a control group that applied no such pressure, and in that group, only one subject out of 35 ever gave an incorrect answer. In other variations of the experiment, it was found that 1 to 3 peers would have a diminished effect on the real test subject. Once you get 4 peers, the effect reaches its maximum potency. All you need is 4 people giving an incorrect answer to cause a 5th person to give that same answer with a surprisingly high regularity. Males were about half as likely as females to give incorrect answers. Conformity is also higher amongst members of an in-group. If the incorrect answers are being given unanimously, there is a much greater chance of conformity. But if there is even one person who gives the correct answer, then the test subject is much less likely to conform. This is an excellent example of why it's so important to tell the truth, no matter how much pressure other people might put on you to conform. One of the dangers of conformity is the loss of individuality and groupthink. In the Stanford prison experiment conducted in August 1971, men were assigned roles of either prison guards or prisoners. The guards were made to wear uniforms to de-individuate them. They were instructed to prevent the prisoners from escaping. After only 5 days, the psychological abuse being inflicted upon the prisoners by the guards became so brutal that the experiment was shut down on the 6th day. If normal people are surrounded by other normal people who are all behaving badly, things can get out of hand very quickly, and atrocities may be committed by people who would not normally behave in such terrible ways. There are also many examples of groupthink leading to horrific atrocities being committed even on a societal level all throughout history. Cults of personality can form and sweep across nations or even the entire world. Once that snowball starts rolling downhill, it can be nearly impossible to stop. The nightmare of global armed conflict can be initiated by a single individual who manages to convince a handful of people that he is correct. In the modern day, the Western world in particular is experiencing an obsession with individuality. Instead of a cult of personality, we are witnessing the rise of cults of individuality. The irony in this is the conformity displayed within these cults. It is conformity to individuality. If anyone refuses to place the highest value and priority on individuality, then they may face cancellation and any number of strategies meant to punish dissent. Lately, the truth seems to be taking a back seat to my truth. The same people that claim individuality is the most important thing in life seem to think, say, and do exactly the same things as their peers. They all tend to look the same, like they're wearing uniforms, buying the same hair dye and clothing, getting the same piercings and tattoos, whilst claiming to be champions of individuality. These modern rebels have taken over the mainstream institutions and media. Their ideas have become so prevalent that they believe them to be objective fact. If you disagree with their ideas, then they claim that you are simply ignorant of their truth, and you need to be educated on what they believe to be the objective truth. They will apply any necessary pressure to enforce conformity. They preach understanding and tolerance, but they seem to be absolutely intolerant of anything that contradicts their beliefs and preferences. Their moral grandstanding is nothing but virtue signaling, whether they realize that or not. It is possible to promote harmful policies and ideologies because you believe they are good. Genuine compassion and empathy can be hijacked and nefariously used by bad actors to cause people to do harm to others in society. United we stand, divided we fall. This is the fundamental flaw with individuality. It's obvious that even those who are obsessed with individuality realize this. They band together and engage in groupthink and enforce conformity to their social and political movements because they understand that people cannot accomplish much as atomized individuals. They even preach about unification while simultaneously promoting absolute individuality. They don't seem to notice the cognitive dissonance. Another fundamental flaw with the movement to rebel against tradition is that it is being conducted by a minority. They may have a lot of institutional power behind them and the ability to ruin people's lives if they don't fall in line, but this is just the tyranny of the minority, and the majority will not tolerate being tyrannized forever. We're already seeing a lot of pushback against the movement. The forcing of people to conform to nonconformity is having devastating negative effects on society, and even from a purely practical standpoint, it is unsustainable. The obsession with the self is causing people to forego marriage and having children. The people who are having the most children are more traditional and will pass their values and lifestyles on to their children. The people who are obsessed with themselves are less likely to have children, and even if they do have children, they will probably not raise them properly, because you can't raise children properly unless you care about them more than yourself. Absolute independence and individuality are not viable within a society. If you decide to go against the grain and run opposed to the entire world around you, then the world is going to batter you into oblivion. If you declare war against the world, then you are doomed to defeat. There are certainly problems with the system of our society, but you cannot simply burn it all down and hope for the best. The only real way to change the world for the better is with good ideas and working with other people instead of against them. There can be no freedom without laws. You cannot have absolute freedom. You can only choose which kinds of freedom you are willing to pay for. Freedom is hard-earned and requires a lot of work and maintenance. That work can only be accomplished if you conform to social norms and traditions. There are a minority of people who seem to be legitimately demanding absolute freedom, and they expect the rest of us to pay for it. They want us to be just as impressed by them as they are of themselves. They demand that we praise them for being so unique that they've made themselves useless to the rest of society. Or they just want attention and try to gain it by being as strange as possible. They're hoping to shock people, but mostly people just find them to be obnoxious. You may not like the rules of the game. The system may be genuinely unfair and often unnecessarily brutal, but we need to be rational in our response to unfairness and brutality. Shutting down and refusing to play the game or trying to burn the whole social system to the ground is self-destructive and pointless. The only effective way to improve the system is to learn to work well within it and change it from the inside. If you want people to listen to you and take you seriously, you need to be relatable to them. If you abandon all social conventions, then you will not be relatable to anyone, and nobody will take anything you have to say seriously. The only way you can be a successful, unique individual is by learning to balance individuality and conformity. If you want to play the game of life, you can either conform to tradition or to progressivism. Nonconformity is not a legitimate option.